everybody. Manishma, good to see some familiar faces.
It's so good to see you, Esther, after all this time.
After all this, me and Joyce go back like 35 years or something.
We do, and it's really great to see you again.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Hold on, I'm just going to...
just people are still coming in. Can we just wait? It's not quite 6 o'clock yet. Do you mind if we wait just a few minutes?
Sure, go ahead. If anybody... first of all, Joyce, one second. Are you going to be recording it or can I record it?
And I'll send it to you.
Okay, excellent. Also, do you want to pin, do you want to have, you know, I don't know if you want to pin any, I unviewed myself. I don't see myself because if it distracts me, I only see you people, but if you, I don't know how you want to do it. Sometimes video. Say it again.
I've got you on full screen.
Okay. Only if, because the video, I don't know if everyone wants them to, everybody wants to have themselves and all their, what they're eating and everything.
No, it's just you. I've got on full screen. And I will open it up when we have questions and answers at the end.
That's great. So we'll put the chat on later. Excellent. I mean, the chat's on now, but I won't answer till later. All righty. So we'll wait. Okay. Let's see, we got.
Esther, just another couple of minutes.
Sure, no problem. Okay, so I'll be right back. I'm going to turn off my video. I'm here. I'm going to mute myself and turn off my.
Thank you. Okay. Ladies, people are still coming on, so I just want to wait a few more minutes because it's not 6.
Okay.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on Drops of Inspiration. It's really great to have you here. It's been such a long time since I've seen you and you look great. So thank you so much for being here, and over to you.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Joyce. Thank you so much for including me and having me participate in this incredible learning venture. And yes, Joyce, we go back so long, way back, and it's wonderful to see you again and see what you've done and how you have created this platform for so many people to learn. Okay, so your organization is called Drops of Inspiration.
Right.
And what I've devoted the last 30 years to is to ensuring that inspiration isn't some sort of manufactured thing that somebody kind of cultivates by telling a story or passionately, you know, emotes about something. Rather, inspiration needs to be built off information, accurate information. So the source of inspiration, the key to inspiration is ideas. Why do we say Hashem loves us? Why do we say everything will be for the good? Everything is for the good. Why do we say that we have emunah? Why? Can't, and we all know you can't kind of like conjure up inspiration. So what we have to do today is really identify the very essence of inspiration itself. And what we're going to do is we're going to learn what the word emunah actually means. We're going to learn what the key pasuk in the Seder, the pasuk in the Torah that the entire Seder of Pesach Night Seder is built around. It means, and that is going to be, if you have it right now, you can get it ready. It's Shemos, chapter 13, pasuk 8. You can put it into Safaria. Shemot 13:8. That is the pasuk the entire Seder is built about. And through this pasuk, we will learn what emunah truly is. And we will understand how to attain and how to retain emunah. And not by way of, passionate, it's sort of, appeals to the heartstrings, but from real truth, real ideas, real information, real facts. Okay. First thing we're going to do is we're going to start like this. We're going to ask you all to think. The new generation, everybody under 20, all over the world. What is the main message that they are hearing night and day and night? What is the main cultural message? What is the morale? What is the ethic? What is the way of thinking that that has already seeped into their heads? And it's so dominant in the cultures, any Western culture, that if you tamper with this value, if you tamper with this message, you are canceled, you are done, you are out. What is the main message everyone is getting today? And no, it's not be rich. It's not have pleasure. The message that everyone is hearing today is that they are not just entitled to, but they are required to define for all the world what constitutes their identity. What sort of thing am I? Every human being is asked, so how do you identify? By the way, in Frum talk, in religious Jewish talk, it sounds like this. What is your tafkid? What is your special purpose? I'm giving a class actually right after this for another group called the Geula Summit, and it's called Stop Looking for Your Tafkid. Okay. But the main message is, who are you? What are you? And you know what? It produces a tremendous amount of anxiety. How am I supposed to know? How am I supposed to know what sort of unique thing I am compared to everybody else? So should I go looking for my talents? Is that what makes me unique? What if I have talents, but I have never an opportunity to use them because I don't have the time, the money, the resources? I just can't. What about our grandmothers plucking chickens all day? They didn't use their talents, if they, let's say, musically or whatever. And what about in the world at large? Because Judaism, we are a light to the nations. You ask a child, you ask an 18-year-old, how do you identify? Tell us what your gender is. And they don't know because, let's be really honest about it. Let's say some actress walks into the room who's like, you can't take your eyes off because of the way she's dressed in the most captivating way, in the most like outrageous way. And you're looking at her and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm very stimulated by this. Maybe I identify as a lesbian, I don't know. And then you look at some man walks in who's absolutely gorgeous and perfect, and you're looking at them, you go, oh no, maybe I identify as both, I don't know. And then somebody else walks in, chas v'shalom, a child who's been totally, unfortunately, sexualized by the media and she's in a beauty pageant or something, and you can't stop looking because it's a little horrible, but it's interesting. You can't believe what you're seeing. Maybe I'm stimulated by this. Maybe, God forbid, I'm perverted and I like children. Like, people don't know what to think. And if it goes by how I feel at the moment, well, that changes all the time. So asking people to kind of invent their identities out of their hat, out of nothing, out of their feelings is very stressful. Makes the whole world crazy. So what we're going to learn today is what Am Yisrael are here to teach the world. And that is, you can stop looking for your identity because you already have one. And we need to know what it is. We need to know the essence of our identity, and that's going to be the source of our inspiration and the source of our emunah. Okay? So what happened at Yetzias Mitzrayim was not just for the Jewish people. It was for the world at large. As Hashem said many, many times, so that Egypt, the entire empire of Egypt, which was the entire cultivated world at the time, the whole world, so they should all know that I am God. Everything that happened has reverberations till today. Today in America, there is a huge movement, shared legacy of Blacks and Jews, and the entire legacy is shared because of the exodus from Egypt. We stand for the idea that God hates and protests exploitation and injustice of other human beings. So here is where the whole world learned something about who we are and how we're supposed to live. Okay? And because of what happened in Egypt, and because of what happened through the process of the exodus from Egypt, we have the special mitzvah to commemorate this every single year in the Pesach Seder. And when we now analyze the pasuk, the verse that tells us what the Seder is all about, we're going to see built into it, okay, is the deepest understanding of our identity. Okay, so the verse upon which the entire Seder night is built is the verse in Shemos 13, verse 8, which says, V'higadata lebincha, and you shall tell your children, or your child, or your children. And that doesn't just mean your biological children, it means anyone who learns from you is a child. Bayomahu, on that day, saying, now here's the funny words, Ba'avur zeh, on account of this, God did great things to me when I personally, first person, went out of Egypt. There is a pasuk. The pasuk is telling us, it's in context of a bigger topic. And the topic is that there are 3 foods you need to eat on Seder night. Back in the day when we had a temple, there was the Paschal lamb, this sacrifice called the Paschal sacrifice, the Pesach sacrifice, Korban Pesach. Now, if you're a vegetarian, no worries. The only time you had to eat one tiny bit of meat a year was this. That was it. Okay. And then you had to eat it. You had to eat it as we do today. We don't eat the Pesach offering. We don't have it anymore. We just remember it. But they had to eat it with maror, bitter herbs, and they had to eat it with matzah. Okay, and they had to tell their children on the night of Pesach, the 15th of the month of Nisan, at night, on account of this, on account of these 3 things, that's why God did great things to me when he took me out of Egypt. Now there's a problem. In this Haggadah itself, it tells us why we eat these 3 things. Now let's go here. This is a little bit, we have to follow this process to see the big question here. It says in the Haggadah that the reason we eat these 3 things, and we actually explain the reason we eat these 3 things at the same time we say this verse towards the end of the whole story. We say, you know why we're eating, you know why our ancestors used to eat the Pesach lamb, the Korban Pesach? Because God skipped over the houses of the Jewish people. When he was smiting the Egyptians, he just distinguished between the Egyptians and the Jews, and he skipped our houses. We were not caught up in the great plague of the death of the firstborn, and therefore, to commemorate that, we eat this Pesach lamb. We always did when we had a temple. Now we don't. We just have if you're Sephardi, Joyce, do you put a lamb's head on your Seder plate?
We're vegetarians.
Oh.
No, we put a chicken wing.
A chicken wing. Oh, okay, you cave to the Ashkenazim. But we put something that represents the Paschal lamb, and we don't eat it, but we say this reminds us, and the reason it's here and the reason we used to eat it every year was because it was a commemoration of how God skipped over our houses. Then you pick up the matzah and you say, do you know why we eat this matzah? We eat it because we're remembering that when it was time for the redemption, it happened so fast, our dough didn't even bake into bread. And then you pick up the bitter herb and you say, do you know why we're eating this bitter herb? You say we're eating it because we're remembering that there was a time when life was really, really bitter. So all of these three things, if you'd ask anybody, and it says it straight out in the Haggadah, why are you eating these things? It says because they're commemorations of the great miracles. Right? So far, so good. We're all here so far. Go like that. So I know it's makes sense. All right. So now let's go back to the pasuk. You're sitting at the Seder. You must say to your children, to whoever's there, to your students, even to yourself, because guess what? We are honestly, this is a very deep Kabbalistic idea. The only offspring that are truly ours, it's not our biological children. No way, because we can't control them and they're not necessarily, they're their own people. The only offspring that is truly ours is ourselves. When we give birth to our higher self, we give birth to what is called our tselem Elokim, our godly version of ourselves. That's our offspring. And that's why you even tell this to yourself on Seder night. You know, our identity is not based on whether somebody's body works a certain way or doesn't happen to work its particular way. That does not constitute anyone's identity. Whether a person does or does not have a biological child has absolutely no bearing, should have no bearing on their actual identity. Okay, so we'll talk about what the identity really is. Now, you say to your this is the message you say to your child or your students or your friends or your own inner self, and you say, on account of these three things, God did great miracles to me when I left Egypt. Now, this makes no sense. The statement makes no sense. First of all, I didn't leave Egypt, even though we know we have a mitzvah to imagine and feel like we left Egypt. And obviously, yes, that is going to become very relevant. And I personally benefited and experienced a new identity, and it changed my life that this whole story happened. But what do we do with the words ba'avur zeh? On account of these things, God did great miracles, great things for me when he took me out of Egypt. What do you mean on account of these things? God did, and let's go just take it generally. On account of these three foods that I'm eating to commemorate the miracles, that's why God did miracles and took me out of Egypt? Doesn't make any sense. These are symbols of the miracles. These are not the reason that God took me out of Egypt. So if we just switched one word around in this pasuk, everything would be okay. Take the word zeh, which means this, and just put it in the front of the word ba'avur. So instead of saying, on account of these things, God did great miracles and took me out of Egypt, say, these things are on account of the great miracles that God did when he took me out of Egypt. Does that make sense, everyone? Zeh ba'avur, this, and zeh, by the way, is singular, so it doesn't even make sense. This whole pasuk needs so many levels of understanding. This whole verse has to be parsed. Zeh is one thing. So you could have said zos, though these things. Okay, we'll deal with that soon. But leaving that alone, instead of saying these things are on account of the miracles God did when he took us out of Egypt, it would make a lot more sense if we said that, I'm sorry, instead of saying on account of these things, God did great miracles, it would make a lot more sense if we said these things are on account of the fact that God did great miracles, correct? But this is not how Hashem wrote the Torah. Hashem wrote it the first way, ba'avur zeh, on account of zeh, on account of this. And this is singular. So let's start analyzing the word zeh. What is this thing that on account of it, God took us out of Egypt? And you have to say this when you're actually looking and dealing with the three foods. Okay, so let's go back about 3,500 years. It's Egypt. We're in Egypt. We've been persecuted for 200 years, 80 years of really bad, hard labor. Now Moshe came and he starts with the plagues. And he tells us, this is what's going to happen. On the 14th of the month of Nisan, you're going to take this little sheep in the evening toward when it gets dark, dusk time, right after in the late afternoon, and you're going to slaughter it with a group of people that you already organized together. And that little 3-hour time slot where you take the Korban Pesach, the Paschal lamb, and you slaughter it and you prepare it, those 3-4 hours have a name. They're called the holiday of Pesach. And then when it gets dark, And it becomes the 15th of Nisan because our days start at night. We have a new holiday. It's 7 days. It's called the holiday of the matzot. And you're going to go home. Let's say it's 8:30 at night and it's dark in Egypt and you have your lamb. And then you're going to sit down and you're going to eat that lamb. And you know how you have to eat it, the Torah says? You have to eat it with matzah. And you have to eat it with bitter herbs. And then at midnight, there's going to be this great revelation of God in Egypt. At Chatzot Halayla, in the middle of the night. And all the firstborns of the Egyptians will die, and the Jewish people will see with absolute clarity that God himself is present in the world, and that God is interfering in history, and they are part of this great story of the divine protest against the devaluation of human beings. And so the Jewish people go home and do that. So let's review what we just said. So hours before the miracles ever happened, hours before God skipped over the houses, and hours before they ran out of Egypt, and way before the bitterness was a memory, they already ate these three foods. Why were they eating these three foods before the miracles that these foods would commemorate ever happened? You see the question? The miracles that these foods commemorate didn't happen yet. That bitterness was a memory, that they went out so fast. They didn't go out till the next morning, actually. That God would skip over their houses hours later. So the definition of the word zeh, this, that's what we're getting to. What was it that allowed them to sit there with their belts on, as the Torah says, ready to go, eating these foods before anything ever happened? That's the definition of the word zeh. Zeh. Now, this little word zeh appears again, not long after this moment, a few days later, 7 days later, at the splitting of the sea, where God's presence among the Jewish people and in the world itself was so clear that the Jewish people pointed and said, as we say in the song on the sea, Zeh, the same word, Zeh Keli, this is my God, Va'anvehu. And Anvehu means I will beautify it, but it also means, if you take the word in Hebrew and divide it in half, it has two words in it, Ani Vehu, me and him, we're one. We're in this together, we're totally one. That word zeh has a lot of layers. And that's on account of those layers. That's why God took us out of Mitzrayim and out of all our personal afflictive situations, because we exit afflictive situations by our state of mind. Not necessarily literally, but by our state of mind. So what's zeh? Zeh, that little word, is the word for absolute conviction. So sure, so absolutely secure in our identity of being part of God's existence, as we're about to explain, that even when things haven't happened yet, it doesn't matter. It's as if they already happened, because the truth, the reality is so pervasive, so clear to us. That's the word zeh. That's why they sat there commemorating miracles that didn't happen, eating foods that represent miracles that never happened yet, because their conviction was absolutely bulletproof. And on account of that, that is why the great Nisan, the great miracles happened. And on account of that is also in our own journey to self-redemption. There is this attribute, this quality called zeh, conviction. Okay, what is this conviction based on? How'd they get it? How'd they get it? Yes, Moshe did some miracles. We know that. All right. But we also know, that nowadays there are times where the locusts cover the skies and nobody repents. We know there are times where the rivers turn red, even with algae and this and that, and nobody thinks it's a miracle. We know there are times where pestilence happen and all the tons of animals die, right? I mean, don't forget, Moshe did things that do happen in the world, and it's very easy to rationalize them. So, and they could have. Where did their conviction come from? This is the question. Okay, where did their conviction come from? Well, these people in Egypt, these Jewish people in Egypt, they have a history. Okay, they go back to Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Jacob and all the mothers. And what did they discover? And what did they bequeath to their children? And therefore, what did the Jewish people have as a framework for developing their conviction in Egypt and sticking to it and understanding it? Okay, so we're going to go back to the essence of Judaism, the basic, most foundational idea in Judaism. Okay, Yirmiyahu says, Kodesh Yisrael LaHashem, the Jewish people are unique, separate, distinct for our God. And he calls us Rashis Tevuato, the first of God's crop. Okay. Lo kol ochlav yeshama, whoever consumes them will be guilty. Ra tavo aleim, disaster will befall them. What does it mean that we are the first of God's crop? In fact, the very, very first word in the Torah, bereshit, in the beginning, Rashi translates, the main commentary Rashi translates, that it has deeper layers, many deeper layers. One of the words is Bishvil Yisrael. Why did God create the world? On account of Israel, who are called Rashid, who are called the first. And he quotes this very pasuk from Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah. It says the Jewish people are unique. They're Rashid. They're the first of the crop. Well, what does that mean? What in the world does that mean? Well, don't forget that the Jewish people do not appear on the scene for thousands of years after creation. First, you have the 6 days of creation, which easily are equivalent to billions and trillions of years. In fact, my grandfather, Rav Shimon Schwab, wrote an article. He's among many great scholars who wrote articles about that. When we start counting the age of the Jewish, the Jewish count of years, 5781 is, it's not including the 6 days of creation. So then from that point, it took 2,000 years for Abraham to emerge. So there's no Jews for a very long time. And Abraham's not only Jewish, the father of all monotheistic religions. It took another 500 years for the Jewish people to form in Egypt and leave Egypt and go to Sinai, Har Sinai. So we don't appear for a very long time. Okay. So what does it mean we're the first of the crop? Well, when you have a crop, when Hashem seeded the world with the human race, and you seed your field with, to grow a crop, the first of the crop to mature, the first of the crop to ripen. What do you do with it? Well, in Judaism and Torah, you harvest it and you set it aside. What we're saying here is the Jewish people are the first among the nations to spiritually mature, to ripen spiritually. What does that mean? What that means is there's only 2 alternatives of how one sees themselves, 2 identities. And from those 2 come either a trillion versions of the fake identity or the one real identity. There's 2 ways a person can see themselves, okay? And we're going to go into an idea here, which is I speak about all the time, absolutely all the time. I'll just introduce it, and then I'll let you know later about a more in-depth series to develop this idea. You ask people, what's your relationship with Hashem? Which really is asking them, what's your identity, And I ask people to take a paper, or imagine you have a paper, and draw Hashem and draw yourself in space. Where would you put yourself vis-a-vis God if you had to draw it on a paper? And many, many people, the most common version of this, when they try to figure, where would I put Hashem? Where would I put me in space? The most common version you can imagine is Hashem is way up there and I'm down here. All right. God is a big boss, everything, creator, manager, everything in the sky. And I'm a little person, a little tiny thing down here. And then you ask them, well, what does that relationship feel like? And what happens in such a relationship? And you say, well, it feels helpless and small and vulnerable and purposeless and threatened all the time, dangerous. And, what do I do? Like, well, I promise God to be good. And then maybe it won't be, maybe my life won't be so bad. So this, unfortunately, is how some people think about it. And in that relationship, a person is sort of adrift and alone, full of everything around them is a threat. And basically God is the one you make deals with because, he is the most strong. Well, there's nothing at all about this model that's Jewish. It's the most anti-Jewish thing possible. We have to eradicate it from our minds. Rather, what our ancestors discovered, what the Avot and the Imahot discovered, what Avraham discovered, because he was a scientist. He looked around the world and he said, "There's too much going on here. It's too complex. It's too much design. It's too intelligent. It's all organized. This is the work of a mastermind." Avram and our ancestors understood the idea that God is everything, everything. Imagine that paper. Everything is Hashem. So where do you put yourself? You have no alternative. You got to put yourself somewhere in the middle of it. So they say, that's weird. I'm in the middle of God. I'm like part of God. Well, think to yourselves. Do you know any sort of human relationship where somebody literally exists in someone else? Literally in someone else? And the answer is, of course we do. Hashem starts every single person in someone else. This is Kabbalistically referred to as the Sphira of Malchus. We won't go into that now, but it's the model of the fetus in the womb. Our relationship with God is that we exist as a participant in God's existence. Imagine you are part of God's existence like a fetus is part of the mother. Why can't the fetus see the mother? Very simple. Very simple, because it's in its own little cocoon. There's an actual barrier in Torah, in Devarim, it's called the mechitza. Hashem says, I made a mechitza. I made a barrier between the upper realm and the lower realm. And therefore we can't see God with our five senses. But that doesn't mean that we are not participating in Hashem's existence. Now that barrier, that mechitza, it went transparent at the moment of midnight on Pesach night. It went transparent at the splitting of the sea, and it went transparent at Har Sinai. So the Jewish people got to experience that absolute clarity that, of course, we're part of something bigger than us, and we just got a chance to see it, to actually see it. And all through the last book of the Torah, Devarim, Moshe says to the Jewish people, don't forget what your eyes saw. Don't forget. Tell it to your children. You saw it. By the way, lest we feel like, how are we supposed to discover God? How are we supposed to discover what we're part of if we can't see it? Just wait for some big miracle? And the answer is no. We have a feed, like the baby has an umbilical cord. We have a feed directly from God. Just like the umbilical cord goes into the middle of the baby. So that's the mashal, that's the allegory. We also have a feed from God straight into us. It's called the soul, the neshama, and think about it as an umbilical cord straight into your psyche, straight into your mind. And that's why we think godly thoughts. We ask questions like, what is my purpose? What should I do with myself? And how should I act properly? And what I want to know, I'm curious, what's my, how does it, we ask about eternity, and we ask about justice and all sorts of things that have no bearing on our survival, our physical needs. Okay, so the Jewish people through Abraham started this. We're the first to understand. We're the first to spiritually ripen and understand that a human being is part of something much bigger than themselves. We're part of God's existence, and God will speak through those who understand that. If a person understands this and aligns their mind with their true identity, then God will put thoughts into a person's head. That's called prophecy. That's called epiphanies. That's called understanding. And the person will see the world from a whole different perspective. And Torah helps us do this. It's the key. So the Jewish people were the first people to know from our ancestors that we are part of something bigger. This is God's world. So what we call this, I've given this sort of names, knowing that you're part of something bigger, knowing that you're part of a nation that saw that transparency, knowing when we were in Egypt that we will see that transparency, because if we're part of the mother, we will know it one day. Absolutely. It will be known because it's a fact, because it's reality. So obviously we'll see it one day. Absolute conviction. We call that creator mode. And I have an entire series all about this. Creator mode, which means we're part of the creator and we operate as creators. The alternative, which is how the Egyptians lived and how every other corrupt culture lives, is the following. Very simple. They open their eyes around and they look around the world. They see that mechitza, that barrier. They see the physical world only. And they say, oh my goodness, what a world. There's so much I got to manage in this world. I got to manage so much here. I got to get food. I got to get income. I got to get married. I got to maybe have kids. I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be poor. I don't want to be sick. I don't want to be helpless. I don't want to be stupid. I don't want to have no influence. I don't want to be irrelevant. I don't want to be abandoned. I don't want to be all the worries that I have. How am I going to manage it all? And I say, all I have to work with is my wits. And they completely abandon or refuse to hear or don't know that it's not like that. They're part of something greater. And who they're part of, God, their mother, can they're going to choreograph things. And this is what we are told often in the Torah: if you do the mitzvot and you learn the Torah, I'll send the rain, and you won't have famine, and you won't have war. Right? This is the ideal. But if and that's cool, and then we get to just use our intelligence and our God-given minds to discover and understand and grow our perception of all the great truths in the world through learning Torah. The alternative is spend our whole lives casting around in anxiety for how to manage all the variables in my lives that are bombarding me and threatening me. Now, when a person feels bombarded and threatened by everything, that's what we'll call survival mode. All they want to say, I'm all alone, and I gotta provide for my needs. I gotta get my needs met. And there's two drives that take over. Self-preservation. I gotta get my needs met. And you know what? I can't worry about anyone else. Sorry. I gotta steal, I gotta cheat, I gotta lie, I gotta backstab, I gotta take the house you were just bidding on. I gotta get my needs met. Sorry. Self-preservation. And it's all justified. This is really the meaning of the sin of the tree of good and bad. It's good and bad based on my determination, because hey, you know what? I'm going to die one day. I'm scared. I'm scared of all the things that can threaten me, death itself, and all the other versions of it. So I got to do what I got to do. I say what's good and bad. Okay, survival mode. And self-preservation. And the other drive is pleasure. Why should I say no to myself? Why? We're going to die. Who cares? We're just here to live. There's nothing more. We're not part of anything bigger. There's no greater truth. So why should I say no to myself? Why should I decline the pleasure? Why? If I have a trigger, a sensual trigger, why should I say no? What's the difference? As long as I won't get put in jail for it, I won't get caught. So pleasure and self-preservation drive a person in survival mode. The Jewish people were the first to appreciate and understand that this is not the way to live. It leads to a terrible, terrible life. Because you know what? Living just to get your needs met is stressful. And when a person puts their own needs first, you can be sure that their relationships will be terrible. Okay, the stress will cause them to look for other self-soothing mechanisms like drugs and alcohol and distractions of all that. It's painful. Okay, the Jewish people are the first to realize this is not a way to live. The Egyptians were the essential, most powerful nation on earth and the model of survival mode. Everybody is a prop in our show. We want power. We want to be able to do what we want. We want pleasure, and everybody else will be exploited for that purpose. Nobody's needs matter but ours. Nobody has anything to express besides my own personal needs, and they can be treated as I feel like treating them. There's no limit to the brutality. It all doesn't matter. And this mentality is alive and well today in North Korea and South America and in the Arab countries. It's still alive today, all over. Hitler, it's all alive. Extreme survival mode. The Jewish people are the first to understand this is not the way to live. And it was through the Jewish people going through the experience of Egypt that Hashem turned us into a nation that lived it, been there, done that. We know what it means to be in survival mode. We know what it means to spend your life exploiting everyone else around you for your own power and fantasy of security in the world. We know, we've been there. And so now the Jewish people forever, through this experience of Yetzias Mitzrayim, we are going to be, and these are the people that sat there that night eating the Korban Pesach with the lettuce, with the bitter herbs and the matzah, ready to go out, ready to follow Moshe into a desert, ready to go to Har Sinai and commit to this. They're the people that said, yes, you know why we went through this whole experience? We weren't being punished. We didn't do anything wrong. You know why we went through this whole experience? Because God fashioned us into a people with a mentality, a psyche that understands the way you're supposed to live. Creator mode. Look at Israel today. Secular Jews, this is so seared into the psyche of the Jew that even a Jew today who's so-called not religious, what drives them? Not survival mode. Everybody's a threat to me. I hate everyone who's different than me. I hate everyone who's a different color than me. I hate everyone who's a different race than me. No. All we do all day is invent ways to make life better for everybody. We're in creator mode. The Jewish people do not discriminate on any basis whatsoever. Anybody on earth can convert. Even Amalekis can sneak their way in. There's no basis or discrimination. It's an ideology. It's a way of seeing the world. We were the first to spiritually ripen and the first to commit. And when the Jewish people sat there that night of Pesach, and this is what we have to feel personally, and they said, you know what happened? It was on account of this conviction, this knowledge that we know how to live. We know that the other method is no good, miserable and unfair and unjust, and God protests and God will rage against it and it will not be tolerated. Even Abraham Lincoln said, we can't do this anymore. God will punish us. Why? How do you know that? From the Jews. Right? That human beings have dignity, that we have a soul, that we have godly thoughts in our heads. No, we're not just objects for someone else to use and discard. And that truth, that knowledge of what constitutes the identity of a human being. Every single human being is in the womb. Every single human being is part of God. Every human being is a participant in God's own existence. And through those thoughts that are being fed into our minds, through our neshama, we speak and we act. And Torah is those thoughts of God in a book given to us. And we learn them and we speak them and we act them and we channel this reality and this truth. And that's why we're full of chesed. We care about other people and we value life so much. And we try to better life because that's who we are. And the conviction of that constitutes an identity. That constitutes every human being's basic starting point identity. You don't got to find it. It's there. You found it. You're part of God. That's your identity. And you have the ability to learn about that and have God's thoughts fill your head. And when a person knows that and says, you know what? It wasn't just my great, great, great grandparents that came out of Egypt. I personally, knowing this, attaching to this, I personally am redeemed from my own mitzrayim, my own narrow constraints, my own afflictive survival mode states of mind, jealousy and anger and frustration and confusion and depression, and not clinical, obviously there are chemical things, but all that stuff coming at people because we're trying to figure out how we're going to manage everything and it's all too much for us, like the virus. That's what we opted out of a long, 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 long time ago. And we never opted back in. Never. Even in Egypt, even in Germany, you know, even a Jew wasn't even religious. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. We will never see ourselves as nothing but props, just helpless slaves. We won't see ourselves like that. They could do it to us, but we won't see ourselves like that ever again. We know what creator mode is, and we initially activated even in Auschwitz. And the second we got out of Europe, Eretz Yisrael exploded with creativity, exploded. More Torah learning by women, more than there ever was in history. More Torah yeshivas and hospitals and creativity and benefits to the world more than there ever can. We're second to America, You know all this. This is what happened. The Zeh Keli, this is my God. Va'anvehu, ani v'hu. I and him, we're one. We're literally one. Literally. One day that machitza, that boundary, that doesn't let us see God with our five senses, but we know the thoughts are entering our head all the time. We're being sustained by it all the time. One day that machitza will be transparent once more. But not only for the Jews, for everybody on earth. Umala kol haaretz de'as Hashem, the entire world will be filled with the vision, the clarity of God. And everybody will finally mature like we did thousands and thousands of years ago. And everybody will finally understand that you don't have, it's not survival of the fittest inside the womb, everybody looking at each other. Imagine a billion fetuses in the womb, billion people all fighting with each other, but they all have their own supply source from God himself, you know. You don't have to fight with each other. You're part of something who can provide for you. That will be clear, and it'll be so foolish. We'll look at the way the world was and with such remorse and such embarrassment, say, how could we have lived like that? And everyone will beat their swords into plowshares and view each other as assets like the Jewish people always have, and see how much creativity and ingenuity can come out of every person. And imagine when the bulk of human resources, money and manpower and brain no longer goes to war and the military. Imagine that. Imagine how much money and resources goes to the military all over the world because we're all in survival mode. Imagine if all of those resources get funneled back to build people, to invest in education and in creative discovery of the world and development of things. Imagine that. That's the future, and led by Mashiach. But this is what we're telling our children. This is the main message of Seder night. Say there was a conviction by the Jewish people of what our identity is, and it's not just for us. This is for everybody. We understood what constitutes the identity of a human being, and we opted in for it no matter what it would take. And you know what? We had a lot of opposition. People don't like that because you know what? They like survival mode. They like to be Hitler and Mussolini and Kim Jong-un. They like to be the most powerful, and they like to suppress everybody. They like it. They don't want to hear this more, to be honest, slightly socialistic idea of everybody's equal. Everybody should have everything. One person shouldn't have everything at the expense of everybody else. Everybody has something to offer. Everybody should have freedom. Everybody should have their basic needs met. Everybody should have a day off. Everybody should have medical care. No, they don't want to hear this. But that's Jewish. Only the Jewish people said that. And there was a lot of opposition. And that's, by the way, the little half of the matzah you break, you know, right after you dip the karpas in the salt water, because that journey of our message, it's the smaller piece of the story, and it comes with difficulty and it comes with some tears. But the other half of the matzah, which is waiting to be united with the small half, the large half, hidden away, that's the future reality. That's the future transparency. That's the future when the whole world knows what we know, and they all mature and they all opt in for a much, much better identity and a much better lifestyle. That big piece that's hidden, that's the reward, that's the final revelation. By the way, it's not by accident that the children hide the matzah and we give them a prize, because that future great revelation, that schar, that great reward for our efforts is hiding and waiting for us. Okay? And this is the message of Seder night. I personally am a different human being because I have an identity. And you know what formed my identity? My ancestors and the Jewish legacy and our maturity, our spiritual maturity, that I know who I am and what I'm part of. And I saw it in Egypt. I saw it in Egypt, and I said it. I said, this is my God. I'm one with him. We're one. And the mitzvah is, and this is what is emunah, inspiration. How do you get inspired? How do you have emunah? The word emunah doesn't mean faith. It means ne'eman, trustworthy, committed. Ne'eman, absolutely committed. Committed to what? Committed to truth, committed to what we saw, committed to what we learned, committed to what we know. So what's the mitzvah? How do we stay inspired? We have a mitzvah every day to remember Egypt. We do it in davening, the Exodus from Egypt. But the mitzvah is to commit to always going back in our minds to what we learned, what we knew, what we experienced about our identity, who we are, going back and remembering and committing to what we experienced, which is we saw firsthand, it's recorded in the Torah, that we exist as part of a HaKadosh Baruch Hu existence. Hashem works through us, taught the world a lesson through us. We are God's mouthpiece in the world. We're part of God. We are channeling God. That's what we saw. That's who we are. That's what we experienced. And never forget that. Go back and remind ourselves that over and over again. That's what the word emuna means. Be trustworthy to it, commit to it, pass it on to your kids, teach people what it is. You cannot generate inspiration out of nothing. It is coming from our identity. The reason we are moved and the reason we sacrifice and the reason we are driven is because we know who we are. And it's not just we invented this idea of who we are, we experience this idea of who we are. Okay, we know who we are. We understand that we are part of this greater existence. And I'll end with this one idea and take your questions. Yaakov, who represents his journey, represents the whole long thousands and thousand years long journey of the Jewish people through the exile. He was the one who was identified with calling Hashem, calling God, the name Makom. If you remember in the Torah, Vayifka ba Makom, he bumped into the Makom. Makom means place. If you think about a fetus in the womb, Hashem, or the mother, is the place that the fetus exists within. The Gemara says that. Hashem is the makom for the world. The mother is the makom, the place that the fetus exists within. Okay? And that is the God that we understand. That is the name of God we relate to. That is what keeps us connected, gives us strength. Because if that's true, then it's got to be revealed because it's a fact. So it will be known because it is the essence of reality. So obviously it will be known one day. We don't know how long it'll take, but it will be known. And that is our conviction. We know it. Eventually, everyone will know it through the Jewish people, through the story of the Jewish people. That's how the rest of the world's going to know it. And our job, Seder night, is to tell who's ever with us, to tell ourselves, this is who we are. I'm convinced of it. I commit to it. And that's the word zeh. And on account of zeh, on account of that conviction, that is why great things will happen. And a person will be able to be redeemed from their own little Mitzrayim. Okay.
Esther, truly inspirational. Thank you. I'm going to open it up.
Sure.
And I'm ask the ladies if they have any questions to please ask now.
Sure. Put it in the chat. I'm watching the chat. What do we got?
Feel free to ask now. Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. I'll let you know that this whole idea of the fetus in the womb and the neshama and the tzel mokim, Mirta Shem, after Pesach, I'm going to be starting a short course, text-based, going through the sources for all of these things, where these foundational ideas come from. I'll send the flyer to Joyce. It'll be a Zoom course. If anyone wants to participate, we'll learn these ideas on a much deeper level.
I want to know where you were 50 years ago when I was struggling all these past 50 years to know what's my tafkid and what's my identity and all this kind of thing. You should have been there in seminary to teach us.
This whole thing with finding your tafkid, it sounds like, oh, you're so special, you have your own tafkid, but really it's just annoying because how am I supposed to know? And the truth is there's no such thing as my unique tafkid. All it is in the situation you're in right now, channeling HaKadosh Baruch Hu, channeling the God that you're part of, speaking and thinking and acting in a way that channels Hashem, that's your tafkid. I always tell people say, oh, your teaching is your tafkid. I'm like, well, today, yeah, but if something happens tomorrow and I have to devote my energies to that, then that's my tafkid, We're not supposed to have an identity. The more you learn every day, your identity changes because you learn something new. There's no set thing that I'm supposed to lock myself into and feel regretful if I didn't.
It's such an easier concept to accept than to say you have one tafkid in life.
Yes, of course. The word tafkid comes from the root pei kuf dalet, pikadon, pikadon. Hashem pakad esara. What it means is a loan. Hashem gives you a loan. Here's your life. Here's your mind. You're part of me. You have your own sort of separate existence because you're under the mechitza. So you get to experience a separate existence for a few years and do something with it. Channel me. That is your tafkid. How are you going to do it? Changes every day. Every day. And based on what your situation you're in and what your tools are at that time. That's it. Everybody has to stop this. It's so stressful. It's so unhelpful to tell people to go find their tafkid.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Can I just make a comment? A wonderful, inspirational talk. And I was thinking about my own identity. When I came to Israel, I was a teenager in the 60s.
Wow.
I won't tell you how old I am, but I was on a kibbutz and we did Israel from top to bottom. And it's just what you were saying. I found my identity from having lived in a Christian country for so many years. And I didn't want to go home. I was frightened of losing what I'd found within myself. Anyway, I went back and didn't come back for many years. But when I made Aliyah, that feeling came back again, that I'd found myself in a Jewish country with, well, most people being Jewish, but I found that that was me, that I was living a lie, basically, you know, in another country. And I really wanted to be here. And what you were saying really very inspirational. It was how I was feeling when I came back.
Wonderful. I'm so happy you made it back.
Really, really
hope
very
you enjoyed
nice.
it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Esther, I'm sure it's very comforting for us to know that everyone tells us, what's your tafkid? What's your tafkid? I found it very reassuring to hear that we don't have to look for our tafkid.
I officially redeem you all from searching for your tafkid.
Hey, Yitzias Mitzrayim.
I cannot, you know, it sounds like it's validating. Oh, you're special, but it's really not validating at all. And yeah, your tafkid will find you, I promise.
Yeah, yeah. Any more questions, ladies? Nope.
Oh, we're good. All right, well, I want to wish you all a beautiful Pesach, beautiful Seder, a beautiful Yantiv, and self-redemption.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Esther, I want to thank you very, very much for being a guest on Drops of Inspiration. It's really, really great seeing you again.
My pleasure.
And thank you very much. Ladies, this is our last session till after Pesach. So we will not be getting for a couple of weeks. And when we do, I will send out an email and a WhatsApp. So thank you very much. I wish you all a Chag Kasher v'Sameach. Have a wonderful Chag. Esther, you too, and great seeing you again. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Esther, the course that you said you're going to prepare, where can we make a connection?
I'm going to send the flyer to Joyce. Hi, Rachel.
Oh, hello.
Hi, good to see you.
So nice hearing from you again.
So nice to see you. I'm going to send the flyer to Joyce. She'll send it out if anyone's interested.
There you go.
Thank you.
All righty. All the best.
Bye.
Bye. Chag
Thank
Sameach.
you.
Chag Kasher
Chag
v'Sameach.
Sameach.
Joyce,
It
thank
was
you
a
for
very
all your
clear
work
explanation.
and
Thank
for
you.
keeping
Well,
us.
Have a wonderful Chag, everyone.
Thank you.
Chag Sameach. Thank you,
Yeah.
Joyce.
Thanks,
Yes,
Esther.
Joyce, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.